Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner here on Human Stories? We retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The candles made blue rings on the cobalt china. Lemon cleaner hung in the air under the steam of rosemary chicken. Nora set the table and set her palms flat on the wood to keep them from shaking. She slid her cell phone behind the cookbook on the counter screen, dark voice memo blinking red like a tiny heartbeat. Grant walked in first with wet soles that left pale prints on the maple floor. He didn't look at the candles. He didn't kiss her cheek. He tossed his keys so they clanged in the bowl by the door and said the house felt hot. Sloane drifted past him in a camel coat, sunglasses still on though the light outside had gone gray. She didn't say hello. She sank into Nora's couch and opened her phone thumb-moving smile curving for someone who wasn't here. Leo and Maya burst in with their coats half off and made a circuit around the coffee table that rattled the glass door of the display cabinet. "Shoes," Nora said soft, pointing toward the mat. "They're fine," Grant said. He lowered his voice to the tone he used in car lots with weak customers. "Let them be kids." A ceramic bird on the shelf wobbled. Nora steadied it with 2 fingers and felt the glaze cool under her skin. She caught Sloane's reflection in the glass panel. Sloane's mouth shaped the first hint of a smirk. "Table looks nice," Sloane said without looking up. "Little formal." "It's your brother's plate," Nora said, "from when he was a boy." She heard herself offer a history and hated how small it sounded. "Mom," Grant said, shrugging off his jacket and setting it across the back of a chair. "This isn't your place to give orders anymore. I pay your internet. I fixed your roof. You're welcome." He had given $20 toward a patch last summer and told everyone it had saved the house. Nora folded the napkins again. She felt the weight of her keys in her apron pocket, a small brass bite pressing against her thigh. Aunt Margot had polished that key with toothpaste to make it shine. "Safe deposit. One day you'll know." "Voices down," Nora said. "We have guests." "We are the guests." Sloane said, no smile now. "Family is not a guest." Nora reached for the cookbook and tipped it just enough to see her phone's black edge breathing red. The kid swung the curtain cord like a lasso, and the curtain rod squealed. "Shoes," she said again. Grant's face hardened in a way that flattened his eyes. He stepped toward the counter, saw the phone, and reached fast. No, you don't get to pull that." His hand closed around the phone before she could move it. "You think you can trap us?" "I want a record," Nora said. "That's all." "Well, here's a record," he said, and let the phone drop. It clacked on the tile and slid. He stepped. The sole of his shoe found it. The sound was crisp and final. The screen spidered out into black glitter. Something burned, that faint, sweet smell of battery and plastic. The red dot went out. Maya covered her ears and whimpered. Leo looked at the shards and laughed because he didn't know what else to do. Nora said, "Please." Sloane stood. Enough, she said, as if she had authority here. She pulled her own phone and turned, angling away, so her voice floated light toward the hallway. "Hi, this is Sloane Hart Whitfield. My mother-in-law is having an episode. She's yelling. She's scaring the children. I think she brandished a knife." She paused, eyes flicking to the counter where a bread knife lay quiet near a loaf. Yes, 1438 Birch. Park Hill, please hurry." Nora blinked. "What are you doing?" "Protecting my family." Sloane said, eyes wet now in a way that would look good on video. Grant pointed a finger at Nora the way he used to point at toys in the store when he was 4. "You have to stop. You're getting forgetful. You left the stove on last week." Mrs. Alvarez smelled gas. Mrs. Alvarez had smelled garlic. Mrs. Alvarez liked to talk. Already a shade lifted across the street. "This is my home," Nora said. Her voice came out too light. She swallowed and tried again. "This is my home." The chicken kept cooking. The oven fan hummed. The ceiling light reflected in the spill of broken glass and made a false little constellation on the floor. Nora crouched, gathered the bigger pieces, and set them in the sink. One bit had a curve that fit the pad of her thumb, and for a beat she saw her own eye warped in at her iris, a brown ring like a coffee stain. She closed her hand and felt the edge. Not enough to cut. Enough to remind. Knuckles knocked on wood. A second later the door opened, and the blue uniforms filled the frame like a pair of calm rectangles. Evening one said, "We had a call." Sloane floated forward with the shiver of a breath that said she had been holding it for too long. Officer, thank you. She's been shouting. She broke her phone. The children are terrified. Nora stood. She wiped her hands on her apron and saw the smear it left. Rosemary oil, a shadow of blood from a nick earlier she had ignored. Coming in with stained hands didn't help. Ma'am, the other officer said, are you okay tonight? I'm fine, Nora said. They came for dinner. He smashed my phone. She called you. Grant put his hands out. She doesn't know what she's saying. She gets like this. There have been changes. What changes, the first officer said. His gaze moved over the scene, mapping a story. Broken glass, knife in the wrong place, children clinging, men tell stories in declaratives, women apologize by reflex. She forgets things, Grant said. Last week she set the burner and walked away. I found it. I keep trying to get her to see a doctor. She refuses. We're here as support. I cook every day, Nora said. She hated the sound of it, defensive, small. I cook every day and I pay my bills and I know where my keys are. Can we see your ID? The officer asked gently. She handed it over. The lamination was a little clouded where it had been in a plastic wallet too long. She felt the absence of her phone immediately, the way a finger feels strange when a ring is gone. Sloane dabbed her eyes. We love her, we do. It's just unsafe. Mrs. Alvarez's blinds lifted farther. Her thin wrist brushed the string. Eleanor, she called in a voice that carried through old glass. Did you take your blood pressure pill today? Nora smiled up at the officer in that fragile way people do when they are trying not to cry. I'm not on any pill, she said. The officer's partner took in the china, the candles, the careful folded napkins with beads on their corners that Aunt Margot had stitched by hand. He looked at the oven clock and at the dish on the counter. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. We can do a wellness eval, the first officer said. Just a quick check, for everyone's peace of mind. Please, Sloane said. She gets agitated. I'm not going anywhere, Nora said. Grant's voice slid lower, almost kind. Mom, let the nice men help. You'll be back in an hour. He had a way of holding words that made them sound like gifts. Nora stepped backward until her hip found the counter. Her hand found the drawer knob next to the stove and felt a second set of keys in a dish inside. One brass, one steel, one tiny and old. She closed her fingers around the smallest and slipped it into her apron pocket with the others. It's my birthday, she said. Silence sat between them. Sloane blinked. We know, she said. That's why we came. Nora laughed without sound. The officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, I am not taking you anywhere. I am going to note that there was a call and that everyone is safe. If anything escalates, call us again. Do you all understand each other? Grant nodded hard. Yes, thank you, officer. He was good in rooms with authority. He knew how to agree. When they left, the street swallowed the sound of their tires and gave back the slow noise of sprinklers in some other yard. The kids were on the floor with the dog-eared deck of Uno cards Nora kept in a drawer for visits like these. They laid down reds and blues and said nothing. Let's eat, Nora said. We already ate, Sloane said. We have another thing. She snapped her case shut, then opened it again, then shut it because the motion soothed her. You should defrost leftovers when we come. This is a lot of work for you. Grant moved to the mailbox on the wall by the door. He thumbed through envelopes with a mechanic's efficiency. Electric's high, he said. You leave the porch light on all night. Nora took the letters back and felt his middle finger still pressed to the corner, as if he could keep hold without touching. She slid the mail into the drawer with the keys and closed it. After they left, the air inside the house felt bruised. The chicken had gone cold. Wax had pooled and hardened into white lakes around the wicks. Nora scraped plates into the garbage. She rinsed the shards of phone screen and watched the water run black with glass dust and then clear. Her hands smelled like lemon rosemary and something burned. She walked down the hall to the back bedroom where the nightstand still kept the old landline. No one used it. Telemarketers called at noon. Wrong numbers from Wyoming called at 2. She lifted the receiver and heard the clean, empty dial tone like a held breath. She pulled the drawer of the nightstand and took out a phone no one knew she owned. The plastic had that faint bleach smell of something that had been wrapped a long time. She set it on the quilt. She pressed the power button and felt the buzz in her palm. In the kitchen, she turned off the oven fan. The house settled. In the window over the sink, the glass was dark, and her own face looked back centered in a square made by the panes. She touched the brass key in her pocket and let her shoulders drop. They would say she forgot. She did not forget. She put the second phone under the cookbook. She found the little red circle and watched it blink. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She stood still and listened the way she used to listen for Grant's breath when he was a baby. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside a dog barked twice, then quit. The light caught in a shard she had missed under the table and made a tiny star on the floor. She left it there. By morning the lemon had faded and the house smelled like cold chicken and wet wool. The little star of glass was still under the table where the light could find it. Nora left it alone. She scrubbed the pan, set the china back into the cabinet, and turned the radio on low so the voices felt like company. When she passed the hall mirror, she touched the small brass key in her apron pocket and kept walking. Grant arrived with 2 suitcases that thumped like small animals. He opened the door with his own key, which he had taken years ago when he was between places and never returned. Sloane followed with garment bags and a box of shoes. She kicked off her boots and took in the room like a realtor. She looked at the window light at the rug at the couch and measured it against herself. Just a few days, Grant said, which meant nothing. Landlord is being a jerk. We need space to breathe. Sloane had already crossed the hall into Nora's bedroom. Closets opened with the quick sound of hangers skittering. "We'll take this one," she called out. "I need the longer rod for dresses." "That is my room," Nora said. She stood in the doorway and watched Sloane fold her sweaters and place them on the chair by the window. Sloane's perfume smelled like green apple and sharp lilies. It hollowed out the lavender Nora kept in the drawer. "It is still your house," Sloane said, voice soft as icing. "But this room is bigger. You will sleep better in the small one. Less draft." The small bedroom at the back had the old quilt with the blue squares Aunt Margot had pieced. It had one window that faced the fence in the shadow of the maple. When Nora moved back there, the bed creaked in a friendly way like it remembered her. She lifted the nightstand and stared at the dust moons it had left on the floor. Then she slid the nightstand back and reached behind it for the cord to the landline. She felt the click in her palm when she reseated it. The dial tone returned like a string pulled straight. Grant took up the living room with his laptop and legal pads. The cord snaked over the rug. He plugged a printer into an outlet behind the bookshelf and it coughed alive. "Work has me remote," he said. "This is perfect." The coffee table acquired stacks of envelopes that were not his, and he went through them with casual ownership. "You should consider autopay," he said. "It would remove the stress for everyone." "I write checks," Nora said. "It is not stress." Sloane cleaned the refrigerator by removing everything that had been there. She set out a row of spice jars and read dates aloud. Cumin expired, paprika expired, cloves ancient. "Do you even know what these are, Nora?" "They smell like what they are," Nora said. She took the clove jar back and lifted the lid. The scent rose like a small holiday. Sloane pinched the jar shut and put it in the trash. Leo and Maya tried out the names they had been given. Miss Nora Leo said on purpose. It sounded like something you call a teacher in a hallway. Maya liked the shape of it and repeated it in a whisper to the dog that did not live here. "Grandma is fine," Nora said. "Mom wants us to be consistent," Leo said. He looked to the couch where Sloane was already sanitizing the remote. Mrs. Alvarez stood at the chain link with a grocery sack bent at the handles. She called over the hedge in a voice that was bright enough to get across. "Morning, Eleanor. Do you need help sorting your pills?" "I do not take pills," Nora said. Grant was on the phone in her bedroom where the carpet still held the print of her dresser. He did not lower his voice enough. "Yeah, Charles, we are at my mom's. It is not safe for her to be alone. We are getting her a placement. Sunset Pines. She will be fine there. Park Hill is up. The market is a rocket." The kids were in the hall. Nora put a finger to her lips. She pretended she did not hear. She moved to the clock on the wall above the bookshelf. It was a cheap round with a pretty face that ticked steadily. She lifted it and opened the back. The hollow inside was clean. She placed the little recorder she had ordered last year for recipes and forgot to use. She pressed the button and heard the pop of start. She hung the clock back where it had always been and made the hands true. She dialed a number that she had learned by heart, which felt old in her mouth. Carter answered on the second ring. His voice was clear. Paper sounded under it. "It is me," she said. "Can we meet? I think the time is here." "We can meet," he said. "Colorado is one party. Keep recording if you can. I have the documents we talked about. Revocation, a new will, the power of attorney with you as the only agent. Your sister's account is shielded." Nora let the radio run while Sloane made a pile of clothes for donation without asking. She ate a piece of cold chicken at the sink salt on her fingers, the skin rubbery but still sweet. When she finished, she rinsed her hands and smelled garlic that had set into her skin. The smell did not bother her. It meant she had made food. That night, Grant invited friends. They arrived with beer in a cardboard case and voices that carried. They set the case on the walnut table and left a wet ring that would not lift. The music was bass that made the glasses hum. "Dude Park Hill," one said. "You could sell in a week." "Already thinking," Grant said. "We need to do what is best for everyone." Sloane stood with a bottle at the island and laughed. "We did a tour of Sunset Pines. It is peaceful. Far enough out so she does not have to deal with city noise." They did not say the other part. That far enough out meant far enough from them. Nora stood by the sink and washed a plate that did not need washing. The water turned hot and reddened her knuckles. She adjusted the tap and the stream softened. She walked away when the laughter tilted ugly. She went to the back room and pulled a wooden chest from under the bed. The hinges made a sound like an old dog stretching. Inside were the things she kept where no one looked. The letters from Aunt Margot came out first. They smelled like cedar and dust and a perfume Margot had worn that no one makes now. The last letter had a bent corner. Nora touched the bend and felt the pulse of paper. "Use the key when you must," Margot had written. "You will know." The key sat warm in Nora's apron like it had a small animal inside it. She took it out and set it on the quilt. It looked ordinary, a little green in the grooves where someone had not buffed it for a while. She placed it in a small envelope and slid the envelope into the book of recipes where the pages had oil stains at the best parts. When the house slept, Nora sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the new sounds of it. Grant snored in the rhythm he had learned as a boy. Sloane's phone chimed once and then went dark. A car moved down Birch and glowed the ceiling for a second. The refrigerator came on and off. The clock ticked. The little recorder inside it filled. Morning came with the smell of coffee that was not the coffee she bought. Sloane preferred a roast that tasted like smoke and gave her a headache. The kitchen felt foreign in small ways. The spoons had been moved to a different drawer. The oats had been put into a jar without a label. The plant by the window had been turned away from the light. Nora returned the spoons. She wrote oats on a piece of tape and stuck it to the jar. She turned the plant back and slid the pot 1 inch to the left for more sun. Grant came back from a run in a shirt that showed the sweat like a map. He nodded toward the stove. "Left front burner was on," he said. Again. "I turned on the back to boil water," Nora said. She slid the kettle and showed him the ring of moisture where it had sat. It whistled. "You were in the shower." He smiled in a way that was not a smile and dropped the subject because he had another. "We should tidy your papers. There is so much clutter." "My papers are in order," Nora said. He came into the small room anyway and opened the file drawer. "Look, this is all a mess. I am helping. We should find the deed." "We know where it is," Nora said. He found the envelope that said will in her canted handwriting from years ago. He lifted it, shook it gently as if it could rattle coins. "Still good," he said, "even if dated." Sloane stood in the doorway behind him with her arms crossed and a look that had thrill in it. Nora felt heat at the back of her neck. She moved past them and took the envelope from his hand. She set it back. She closed the drawer. Her fingers did not tremble. She went to the kitchen and found the landline and called Carter again. "Today," she said, "please." Carter made a time. They agreed on the place he liked because it had parking and a lobby with quiet corners. She left the house at noon with her bag on her shoulder and the brass key in her pocket. The sun hit the sidewalk so hard the air shivered above it. She crossed under the maple and the leaves moved like a shaken deck of cards. When she came back, the front door was propped with a sneaker. The living room smelled like nail polish and beer. The coffee table had gained a new gouge. Sloane was on the phone again near the sink, and the kids were glued to a show that made their mouths hang open. "We are staying through the weekend," Sloane said, covering the mouthpiece. "You will be fine." "I am fine," Nora said. Night thickened. The floor learned the footsteps of other people. In the deep hours, a siren went by without stopping and left a seam of quiet behind it. She slept in snatches. At dawn, she rose before anyone. She packed a small bag with what mattered, the album with Grant's baby pictures, the ring her mother had worn that cut the light like a tiny sun, a framed photo of Aunt Margot at Red Rocks with hair blown sideways by the wind, the recorder from the clock. She took the clock off the wall and left it face down so the dust would leave a ring that would be noticed later. She put the recorder into her pocket and felt its small weight like a decision. She opened the cedar chest again and took the folder with bank papers and letters that had the numbers that were only hers. She folded them into her bag and closed the zipper partway so the fabric could breathe. The zipper made a sound that pulled at something in her. She straightened the quilt. She smoothed it twice. The house was quiet in a way she trusted. She measured the quiet like a seam and cut along it. The hinge on the back door creaked. She paused and listened. The creak sounded like it had sounded since Ray slammed that door once and scared the cat. In the hall there was a shadow that slid past the frame. Not a person, a cloud moving across the glass. She breathed out. From the street a sound rose up clear as a thought. A truck somewhere near the curb shifted into reverse and sang that flat beeping that moves in and out of the ear until it becomes a line you can follow. She stood still and held the strap of the bag so it would not slip. The beeping settled into the bones of the house until it felt like a metronome. Nora lifted the latch on the back gate and stepped into bright air that smelled like hot sidewalk and cut grass. The truck eased to the curb. Carter climbed down in a navy jacket that did not mind dust. Two men followed sleeves rolled eyes taking in the porch and the narrow walk. "You look steady," Carter said. "I am steady," Nora said. They worked with a quiet rhythm. Nora pointed and the men lifted the cedar chest with careful hands. The album, the letters, the ring in its little box with the velvet caved from years of holding the framed photo of Margot at Red Rocks. She left the sofa that had molded to her shape. She left the dishes Sloane disliked. She left the cheap clock face down so dust would mark where it had lived and be noticed. She opened drawers and took the small things that were only hers, the recorder that held voices, the envelope with numbers that did not belong to Grant, the safe deposit key warm against her palm. In the kitchen she paused. The chicken they had not eaten sat under foil that gathered a wet sheen. She wrote a note and set it next to the dish. Eat or throw away. She did not sign it. Out front the maple shaded the truck. The movers strapped the chest and the boxes and the framed photo against the side with soft webbing that did not scratch. The driver checked the knots with a tug that looked like a question and a yes. Carter held the passenger door for Nora. The seat smelled faintly of gasoline and new rubber. When they pulled away, the house shrank in the side mirror until it was just a shape with square windows and a door she could picture in her sleep. Downtown made a different sound. Concrete held heat and the wind that came off the river tasted metallic and clean. Carter parked under a building whose glass skin held the sky like a trick. The lobby smelled like citrus and stone. A woman at the desk said good afternoon and offered water in cups that sweated on their coasters. Nora watched her reflection in the elevator doors as they tried on different lighting. The elevator rose smooth as a thought. The apartment was high enough to see the dark line of the Platte and the roofs like folded paper. The air felt new and thin. The floors were pale wood. The terrace door slid with one finger and opened to a rail that hummed when a freight line moved somewhere beyond view. The kitchen gleamed with quiet appliances. When she turned on a lamp, the shade made a pattern on the wall like leaves. They set the cedar chest in the bedroom. The movers stacked boxes in a way that left the window clear. Carter unzipped a portfolio on the island and slid papers forward. The pages had weight. The pen in Nora's hand pulled like a small anchor and left lines that were sure. "Revocation signed," Carter said. "New will signed." He tapped the place where her name sat alone. "Power of attorney signed. Accounts confirmed. Your sister's legacy is contained and clean." Nora held the last page under her palm a moment longer. She could hear the city through the glass. A siren far away. A horn. A bird that sat on the terrace rail and tapped once with its beak as if testing. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. "I will file what needs filing. Keep your copies somewhere that pleases you." She placed the folder in the chest under Margot's letters. She closed the lid and set the brass key on top. The metal looked old, but it weighted the air. After Carter left, Nora went down to the street on foot. She found a salon with tall plants in the windows and magazines lined in tidy stacks. The stylist cut her hair to her jaw. The ends fell and gathered around her shoes like dark thread. She watched in the mirror as her face emerged again, less hair, more light on bone. The woman painted her nails a deep red that made her fingers look deliberate. She walked 2 doors down to a boutique where the clothes did not come wrapped in plastic. A woman brought a dress the color of wine and zipped it while Nora held her breath. The fabric lay cool and right. The mirror returned a woman who did not apologize to her own eyes. Nora bought the dress and wore it out because there was no point carrying what could be worn. In Cherry Creek, the sales office had glass walls and a bowl of limes on a table that no one would ever eat. A young man named Anthony stood up when Nora entered, his smile practiced in a way that did not feel cheap. He offered coffee that tasted like it had been ground that minute. "I am looking for a house with a yard," Nora said. "I want a kitchen where people can stand and not bump elbows. I want light. I want quiet." "We have quiet," Anthony said. He turned his monitor and showed a series of photos. Grass, clean lines, a long counter of stone that wanted to be leaned against, glass that opened to green. "I will need to verify funds," he said. He said it without any doubt in his mouth. He was prepared for yes. Nora reached into her bag and placed a folded statement on the table. Carter had printed it on thick paper that did not show the numbers through. Anthony unfolded it and did not try to hide his eyes. His face changed first in the eyes and then in the careful jaw. "Of course," he said. "That is sufficient. There is a property not far. If you have time, the owner will allow a showing now." "I have time," Nora said. A familiar voice arrived before the door finished opening. Grant's voice hoarse under the gloss, Sloane's thin and breathy. They came in with a rush of cool air and the smell of car heater, dark crescents under eyes, the kind of sweat that happens when someone hurries for the sake of appearance. "We need an appraisal," Sloane said to the receptionist. "Park Hill, quick turn." Anthony looked up and then back to Nora with a question. Nora closed her folder and stood. She did not reach for her bag. She walked into their line of sight and let the dress do what it had been bought to do. Sloane blinked. Grant's mouth opened before his brain read what he saw. "Mom," he said. "Hello, Grant," Nora said. "Hello, Sloane." Sloane recovered faster. "We have been worried," she said. "Where did you go?" "I went where I wanted," Nora said. She looked at Anthony. "We can go now." "Mrs. Whitfield," Anthony said, palm up to show he was ready. "The owner is waiting." Sloane's eyes dropped to the statement on the table because paper pulls the gaze. Her face worked through the math. She was good at math when it concerned other people's money. "How," Grant said quietly. He did not finish the sentence because finishing would make it real. Nora handed Anthony the folder. She reached for her bag and felt the weight of the keys inside. The glass wall by the door held everyone at once as reflection. Nora in the burgundy, Anthony in his measured blue, Grant and Sloane beyond smaller and blurred by the angle. 4 figures in one pane that held without breaking. The house on the corner of a quiet street had a roof like a line smoothed by a hand. The air out front smelled like cut juniper. The door swung on oiled hinges and let them into a space where light lay in strips on the floor. The kitchen island might have been a stage or a table where puzzles get solved. The faucet arched. The slider at the back opened to a yard with a strip of water that held clouds in its skin. A bird landed and took off. The ripple erased the cloud, and then the sky reappeared. Nora walked with her hand on the counter as if greeting it. When she stood at the back in the doorway, the cool outside air touched her ankles and lifted the hair at the back of her neck. She looked at the fence line. The neighboring house stood far enough that voices would come thin and friendly, as if spoken through trees. "It feels good," Anthony said, and he meant more than the temperature. "It feels like a place someone could live without asking permission," Nora said. He checked his phone. "The owner will accept it, asking if you can show proof of funds now." Nora opened her bag and handed him the folder again. He snapped photos for his file and held the door while she stepped back into the kitchen. She ran a hand up the warm wood of the cabinet and then lifted her palm to smell it. The varnish had a sweet note that would fade in a month. She imagined using a knife on this counter and leaving no mark. She pictured the ring of a glass when someone set it down carelessly, and the swipe of a cloth that would erase it. They sat at the island and signed the offer. Anthony took a photo of her with the key that would become hers when the wires did what wires do. He shook her hand with a glance that said he liked being part of this. Evening laid itself over the city by the time Nora stood in the new living room with the lights low. The truck that had brought her life to the high building had already left for another job. The box with Margot's letters sat on the floor. The terrace door showed her a dark sky and a few stubborn stars that the city could not wash out. She put the ring box on the counter. She set the album on the shelf where it looked too small. She took out a glass and filled it with tap water and drank half standing in the kitchen with the faucet still dripping. At the real house, the one with the yard, she walked with Anthony holding a small envelope. She closed her hand around the keys because the metal was cold and real. The air outside smelled like the neighbor had lit a grill. A dog barked at the corner, a polite inquiry. She stood on the step and looked back down the walk and then up at the eave line. She turned the key and listened to the sound of it tumbling. The deadbolt slid with a satisfying weight. The first night in a new house makes its own music. The refrigerator whirred and then settled. The water heater clicked softly. The glass of the slider reflected the room and the yard in layered pictures that shifted when she moved. Nora stood in socks on the smooth floor and felt the surface gather the warmth from her feet. She set the recorder on the counter. She opened the cedar chest and placed Margot's letters in the kitchen drawer where recipes belonged. She set the ring in a cup by the sink so Light would find it in the mornings. The doorbell camera glowed a small white circle. In the quiet, she could hear the hum of it like breath. When the bell rang, the sound startled her only in the skin. She set her glass down. She walked to the entry and touched the screen. Grant filled it with his face too close. The lens rounded his features. Sloane stood to the side with a suitcase handle in her hand. Leo and Maya were steps behind eyes, shiny coats zipped. The porch light made halos on their hair and made their shadows thin behind them. The microphone button waited for her finger. "Mom," Grant said to the camera, "we're here." Nora felt the weight of the keys again, even though they hung on the hook by the door. She looked at the lock and turned the deadbolt until it settled into place, like a period on a line that had needed one. The house breathed. The light in the entry set a circle on the floor. Outside the porch held their shapes. She watched. She did not open. The intercom made their voices thin. The porch light put a clean circle on the concrete and turned their breath to fog. "Open up," Grant said close to the lens. "You're not invited," Nora said. She kept her hand on the deadbolt and felt the cool metal under her palm. "Family does not need an invitation," Sloane said. Her smile looked expensive and tired. The suitcase handle showed a crease where her hand had held it too long. Nora touched her phone. A line of icons slid green, turned white speaker filled the entry with a voice she knew better than her own. "Sunset Pines is set. We sell Park Hill and wipe out the cards. She will be fine there." Grant flinched as his own words came back to him. Leo looked at Sloane. Maya began to cry without sound, a small, open mouth. "You recorded us," Sloane said. Her voice dropped the sugar. "That is illegal. In my home it is not," Nora said. "I do not owe you this door." Grant tried softer. "Mom, think about the kids." "I am," Nora said. She reached up and turned off the porch light. Their faces fell into dusk. She locked the second bolt. The tiny click felt louder than it was. She stood still until the soft shape of their shadows moved down the steps. The camera's white circle went quiet. In the living room, the glass slider reflected her once and the yard twice. She could see her own shoulders square in a way that felt new. She set the phone on the counter and let it rest screen up. By morning, the war had moved to screens. Sloane had gone live in the front seat of their car. The windows fogged a little at the corners. Mascara smudged under her eyes in a way that read as hurt. She spoke fast. The captions tried to catch up. "She threw us out," Sloane said. "The kids have been asking for her every night. We tried to help. We moved in to care for her. The money changed her." Grant took the phone and angled it too low. His chin filled the frame. "I spent months making sure she ate. I turned off burners. I fixed her bills. She got an inheritance and cut us out." Comments climbed like fish in a tank. Heart icons bubbled. A feed on Nextdoor picked it up. Headline said, "Park Hill Elder, abandoned by greedy mother." Nora watched in the dark with the TV off. The phone glowed on her lap. She could see her face in the glass, a faint overlay, the real face behind the moving words. She read them all until the words went flat. Then she called Carter. "Can we do this now?" she said. "We can," he said. "We will do it clean. Warm light, straight lines. Let the tapes handle the heavy work." They set a lamp to cast a soft pool on the wall. Carter framed the shot so the kitchen did not look like a set. Nora wore a simple blouse that made her skin look steady. She sat at the table. The cedar chest sat behind her, out of focus, a quiet square. The recorder lay in reach. Her hands held the edge of the table as if steadying a boat. When the camera light turned red, she did not clear her throat. She said her name and her age and the street where she had lived for 30 years. She said she had dinner ready when her son arrived. She said a phone broke and a call was made. She did not say more than the scene needed. She tapped play. The recording from the birthday slid into the room, Grant's voice loud and clipped, the clatter of the phone and the bite of plastic. Sloane's call to the dispatcher with the knife that had not moved. The children's small gasps, the 80 hertz of a night. Comments began as questions. Then they turned. People wrote the words they say for private. Someone said they heard the timer on the oven and it made them hungry. Someone said their mother had the same china. The viewer count climbed and stuttered and climbed again. Nora let the next track run. Grant on a call with a friend. The part about Sunset Pines. The part about the house moving fast. A laugh that had no air in it. Then the soft clip where Sloane measured the master closet and said she needed more room. She stopped the audio and looked at the camera. "I am not here to argue," she said. "I am here to show what happened in the room where I cooked." Carter added a photo on the screen for the stream. The oven clock timestamp pulled from the still that night. The number of viewers doubled in a breath. Hearts rose. Someone wrote that they were calling their mother. Someone wrote that they had believed the first video and felt sick now. She played the file where Sloane said the nursing home should be far out, so there would be no drop-ins. She played the clip where Grant described leaving the porch light on because it used power and made her look careless. The comments turned sharp. By evening, the stream had been shared until even Mrs. Alvarez's nephew sent it to her at work. She stood at her sink and watched on a small phone with tired brightness and said the name Eleanor out loud to a room where no one answered. The fallout did not arrive as a single crash. It arrived as a run of small sounds. Grant stared at his screen in the living room of a friend's place and read the email that removed him from his role. His chair made a soft scrape. He closed the laptop with a palm that trembled. Sloane learned at the back of a consignment shop that the owner had watched the video twice and could not look her in the face without seeing the tapes. The owner said she was cutting shifts. She stacked a box of handbags and made the handles point the same way while Sloane stood with her mouth open. The landlord from the old apartment did a walk-through with a clipboard and a sigh and filed a small claim with a stamp in an office that smelled like toner. Nora did not cheer. She sat in her new yard by the strip of water. The wind put a fingerprint on the surface. A fin traced a line and vanished. She drank tea that tasted of mint and tapped the cup twice on the arm of the chair and stopped herself from a third. A week later, there was no Sloane at the door. There was only Grant at the gate alone in a shirt that had been ironed by a hand that was not Sloane's. The sun sat low and made the metal glare. He did not come inside the circle of the camera. He stood back where the sensor did not trigger the chime. "Nora," he said, not Mom, "can we talk?" She opened the door but left the screen closed. He looked older in a way that did not come from time. His eyes were raw. He held a bus pass between two fingers. He kept flipping it. "I was cruel," he said. "I know it. I thought I could ride on what you owed me. I thought money would fix the way I feel about myself. I did not see you." She let the silence between them settle like dust. Then she stepped closer to the screen. "You broke my phone," she said. "You called the police to my table. You told the world I was losing my mind." His jaw tightened. "I did," he said. "I want to say I am sorry. It is not enough and I know it. I can show up for my kids. I can get work. I can stop acting like I am 13. The breeze lifted a corner of a flyer on the pole by the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and was quiet. "Your children need you," she said. "Go be in the place where they stand. Feed them, put them to bed. Get up." He nodded, his face folded around the nod and held there as if it hurt. "Can I call you?" he said. "You can send a message," she said. "I will read it." He looked at the threshold and then at his shoes. "Thank you," he said to the ground. He stepped back and put the bus pass in his pocket. He turned and walked to the corner. He waited for the light and crossed when it turned. She watched him until his back became a person walking, not her son. She closed the door and locked it and hung the keys on the hook. The room held the shape of the conversation for a moment longer and then let it go. That night the house went simple. The water heater clicked once. The refrigerator sighed. She set the phone face down on the counter. She turned it over once to check the time and put it back. At midnight the glass lit on its own. A message arrived and held on the screen like a firefly. She did not touch it. The light faded and left the room dark and plain. Morning came thin and clean. The yard held a skin of light on the strip of water, a pale blue sheet that rippled when a sparrow dipped to drink. The glass slider caught the first sun and threw it back in a soft rectangle on the floor. Nora stood barefoot inside that square and felt the wood warm under her feet. 6 months had rubbed the sharp edges off the days. The house learned her steps and answered with small sounds. The refrigerator sighed and stilled. The kettle made a low whisper before it talked. She had replaced the slider with tempered glass that ran on a track smooth as breath. It kept the cold out and made the reflections crisp. In the morning, the pain held the yard and her layered and quiet. On Thursdays, she walked to the tattered cover and sat with women who passed paperbacks and opinions along the table. On Saturdays, she took watercolors out to the terrace and tried to read the way the maple wrote shadows on the fence. Sometimes she rode a bike along Cherry Creek, the path a thin silver ribbon under cottonwoods. Tires made a soft hiss on dust. The creek flickered to her left and kept going when she stopped. The cedar chest sat in the living room under the window that faced east. Aunt Margot's letters slept in the top drawer of the kitchen with recipes and a pair of shears. The recorder was off. Its red eye had not blinked in months. She kept it in the safe place with the passport and the ring. The brass safe deposit key lived in a small dish by the bed dull, showing where her thumb had found it now and then. She had labeled one spare for the front door and tucked it into the junk drawer where elastic bands and light bulbs collected. A strip of tape over the head of the key said not yet. The handwriting was steady. In the neighborhood, Mrs. Alvarez waved from her porch when Nora passed. The wave was smaller than it had been in spring. It meant many things in one motion. Nora lifted her hand back and kept walking. Grant's messages came in short and plain. A photo of Leo's science project, a dam made from spatulas and foil where water ran and did not run. A line that said he had picked up a second shift and then dropped it when Maya needed a recital ride. A picture of a pot on a stove steam rising the angle, not artful, but enough to show he was cooking. He had not asked to come over. He had not asked for money. He sent the words and waited. She read them and sometimes wrote back. He wrote one afternoon to say he had been made lead on a line. He sent a photo of the tag with his name printed clean on plastic. The letters looked square and new. He had held the tag close to the lens by mistake, and his thumb filled the corner of the frame. She saved the photo to a folder that did not have a title. The day the roses began to climb the trellis by the slider, Nora kneaded bread. The dough pushed back like a living thing. Her hands were strong and slow. She set the round to rest and turned to the sink. Outside the yard moved in small pieces. The bird on the rail stamped its foot. A leaf fell without wind and landed on the surface of the water. Rings moved out and faded before they reached the edge. She rinsed her hands and heard the soft ping of a message on the counter. The screen lit her palm when she picked it up. A few words from Grant. Promotion came through. "Kids are good. Thank you for reading." She set the phone face down and let the light go out on its own. The dough rose. The oven warmed the kitchen. The glass made the room look doubled a version of itself in front of the real one. On a Sunday, she parked near the chain link at the Little League Diamond in City Park. The air smelled like sunscreen and dust. The stands held a scatter of parents in caps. A boy shouted a name and stretched the vowels. Nora took a spot at the far end under a hat with a brim. She kept the bill low and watched Leo swing at a slow pitch. He missed and shook his arms like a bird shaking water, then set his feet again. The next ball came in round as a moon. He hit it. The sound made a clean pop that carried. The ball arced over the shortstop and landed on grass. Leo ran with his head down and his elbows high. People clapped. Someone whistled once. Grant stood by the fence in a plain shirt. He leaned forward and said something to the coach and then backed away to let the kids play. He did not scan the stands. He kept his eyes on the field. When the inning ended, he handed Leo a water bottle and nodded at something the boy said. His mouth moved and then shut. He listened. Nora left before the game finished. She walked to her car and sat with her hands on the wheel. The radio stayed off. The breeze moved through the open window and lifted a curl of paper from the passenger seat. It was a flyer from the bookstore, a list of next month's picks. She put it back. In the side mirror, the diamond shrank and went green. She drove home under the long sky and let the lights go red and green in their own time. At the house, she watered the roses. The hose made a low hiss. Water darkened the soil and turned the smell deep. Drops clung to the thorns and held the last light for an instant. She went inside and locked the door with a motion she could do with eyes closed. The keys clinked against the hook and hung there a bright shape in the corner. She wiped the counter without needing to. The cloth left the faint smell of lemon. In the glass she saw the yard and her the room and the stripe of sky. She turned off the lamp and the glass became a blank square that gave nothing back. The house settled. Somewhere a pipe ticked. She went to the bedroom and pulled the shade 2 inches enough to make the room soft but not dark. On the nightstand, the small brass key sat on the dish. She set a glass of water beside it. The surface reflected the window and a dot of streetlight. She reached for the switch. The click sounded like a coin on wood. The room folded around that sound. In the morning, the birds started before the sun. The water on the strip outside lay still as stone. When she slid the door, the track whispered, and the cool air found her ankles. She stood with her coffee and watched the light move across the fence. A sparrow hopped to the rail and cocked its head as if to ask. She lifted her hand and the bird flicked away. The circle on the floor shifted an inch with the sun. She stepped into it and let it warm her feet. The phone on the counter stayed dark. The recorder in the drawer slept. The key on the hook caught a line of light and held it until the light moved on. The house breathed. She breathed with it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.